we are live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Kent. I'm the Executive Director of Net Literacy, a student-founded digital literacy organization that has a focus on internet safety. And I'm really excited about today's Google Education on Air, which has a focus on internet safety and provide practical and actionable strategies for students to enhance their online reputation as they seek scholarships, employment, and admissions to competitive colleges. This hangout is for students as well as parents, guardians, and educators. Today we'll discuss the online reputation landscape and what's in store for the future. What are the best practice examples of engaging students when talking about online reputation, and where are the most useful resources? But to start off with, allow me to introduce our all-star cast of thought leaders in this subject area. Firstly, a journalist and youth advocate, Ann Collier is editor and executive director of Net Family News, which she founded in 1999 on the premise that information empowers parents at a time when kids' tech interests have become a key part of parenting. Net Family News is a blog, RSS feed, and email newsletter with subscribers in more than 50 countries, and is also co-director of the San Jose, California-based nonprofit organization ConnectSafely.org. She currently serves on Facebook's Safety Advisory Board and the Advisory Board of the London and Washington-based Family Online Safety Institute and GetNetWise.org, a project of the Washington-based Internet Education Foundation. She served as co-chair of President Obama's Online Safety and Technology Working Group, and you might recognize her from the PBS Frontline episode, Growing Up Online. Ann worked in print, radio, TV, and web versions of the Christian Science Monitor, served as an editor in the consumer magazines, and has written for Microsoft's StaySafe.org, GetNetWise.org, Children's Technology Review, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's NetSmarts.org. We're also really lucky to have Tim Lorden, who is Executive Director of the Internet Education Foundation, a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to educating the public and policymakers about the potential of a decentralized global internet to promote democracy, communication, and commerce. The IEF assists the efforts of the Congressional Internet Caucus Advisory Committee in educating Congress about the internet and related policy issues. Mr. Lorden helps coordinate those Internet Caucus Advisory Committee initiatives as well as other public education activities regarding the internet. In 1999, he helped develop and launch the GetNetWise one-click parental empowerment resource and has since launched the State of the Net project designed to measure the success of the internet in cultural, socio-political, and economic terms. And via phone, we have Sue Sherburne, who is an adjunct faculty member in the Biobehavioral Health Department and Assistant Director at the Morgan Academic Support Center for Student Athletes. In addition to developing and instructing courses as part of the first-year enrichment program, she also oversees personal development and community outreach programming for the athletic department's inaugural Champs Life Skills program. Sherburne is an academic counselor for the men's and women's basketball team, serves as an advisor for the Athletic Directors Leadership Institute, and is co-advisor to the Student Athlete Advisory Board and directs the Penn State Lionettes dance team. She also serves on the Division 1A Athletic Directors Association Student Athlete Development Task Force. So today we have a fantastic all-star team, and I'm really excited about our upcoming conversation. Just as a background, as some introduction, you know, having a positive online reputation has been the subject of news stories and blogs because some scholarship committees, colleges, and employers are nowadays Googling applicants and candidates online, and we'll talk more about this. But during the last couple of years, there have been a proliferation of online reputation repair websites that charge a fee to repair online reputations, and some of those sites encourage people to purchase their services with pretty scary-sounding stories and warnings. I'm a student and can tell you that our online reputations are a topic of conversation at high school, college, and university schools these days. But to keep things in context, what happens online is reflective of what happens in the real world. And both the internet and the real world are mostly positive places. In other words, I believe that a poorly written resume causes many more difficulties than for candidates when they or if they are Googled online. In fact, our online reputations are real opportunities to let our friends in the rest of the world get to know how we're making a difference in the world. While a resume is limited to a one page and an interview perhaps to 30 minutes, the internet enables us to support our causes and to contribute to thoughtful online conversations in a unique way. In summary, our online reputations are opportunities to help get out the good word about who we are and what we believe in. So for this purpose of the conversation, we'll avoid discussing some of the privacy issues, which is a separate conversation. But clearly, this is a topical subject, and today we'll focus on actionable tips and best practices while hearing some of the industry's most cutting-edge programs and thought leaders. And to begin with, Anne, could you give us a little bit more of an overview about what's the current online reputation landscape and what are the real forces that are driving it?
Sure, Dan. I think parents and students are thinking about this a lot more now. It comes up when I give talks a lot and, just in my travels. And I think people are really smart to be thinking about it. Sometimes it helps to have a little data to kind of get oriented. So I thought I'd look up some numbers, and some fairly recent ones from this year indicate that, and the data is really all over the place depending on your source, but it kind of looks like somewhere between a third and a half of employers are actually checking out people's social media profiles and other online information before they make employment decisions, hiring decisions. There are a few interesting sort of breakdowns of that. It looks like about 2/3 want to see if the job candidate presents him or herself professionally. So that's something to keep in mind, that you want to look like like a human being, right? You're not professional all the time in life, and I think we're all human beings here, and we acknowledge that we're multifaceted, but it's good to represent ourselves professionally in some places online. And then, about half want to see if the job candidate is a good fit for the corporate culture. And that's very individual and from company to company, and culture to culture, but that's something to think about. And then also about half want to learn more about the candidate's qualifications. And about a third want to see if the candidate is a well-rounded person. So, and I saw elsewhere that it's kind of a good idea if you have interests, things that are really important to you, like a social cause or a community service you're engaged in, or other aspects of you besides your professional ambitions. It's good to have that represented online too. If not, a blog about it, then occasionally, comment on things related to your interests, so people can see that you're a well-rounded person. And then I also think it's interesting to point out that only about a tenth or 12% said of prospective employers say that they use social media as a way to look for bad stuff, to screen people out. And I think that's important to remember. As you pointed out earlier, Dan, it's not all bad. We don't have to believe everything we see in the news headlines about how dire the situation is. I think people are kinder and expect more good than we sometimes see in news reports. So I think that would be true of college recruiters too, athletic recruiters, and I think Sue can speak to this much more and much better than I ever could. But it really is, there's a ton of information out there about people, and I think it's hard for prospective employers to sort through it all. And so you want stuff to rise to the top. You want to sort of search engine optimize what's good about you and what shows that you're a well-rounded human being and what shows that you have interests other than maybe just academics or just sports. And I'll just leave it there and see what other people have to say about it.
Tim, Sue, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to add?
Yes, I do. Anne, what do you think as far as a maturation process goes with not only young people on social networking sites, but also as employers how using social networking tools, individuals, are they getting more adjusted to the fact that people have when they see each other into their prospective employers' lives, that they have a lot of different interests and things like that. Are people? Do you think people are getting more mature at understanding that when they see into other people's lives via social networking, that they can internalize it, they can understand it better? Or are there other industries you think outside of university space that are more old school, that just don't understand how someone presents themselves in social media, that may or may not reflect well when they go for a job?
You're talking about employers and maybe college recruiters getting more sophisticated, or
Yeah, I would.
students?
I would imagine both. College recruiters, probably are getting used to this more quickly than other industries. Other industries like lawyers, the United States Congress, the U.S. government, other industries that may be a little slower to kind of understand, what it's like when they peek inside someone's social network.
I think that's an excellent point. Yeah, this is a point of major transition. I think young people are getting more sophisticated in figuring out that they are being looked at by people they don't know for possible jobs, or positions on sports teams or whatever. Um, and I think also employers are getting more sophisticated too, and other types of recruiters. It's just an incredible spectrum right now, and I think the so-called online safety field, that is also all over the map, and sometimes sort of makes dire predictions. But I think that if I sort of look at that spectrum too, we're seeing more and more good information, and advice about people thinking about online reputation, or maybe a better way to put it is sort of public image management online, and how we represent ourselves in public. In effect, we're all becoming our own best spin doctors, and we're all getting smarter about this as we kind of figure out how to use digital media intelligently, as well as for entertainment and fun. And so, this is this is such a transitional time, and it's people who are thinking about this who are going to do best, and we've all got to be thinking more and more.
Don't you think it's kind of interesting that the apex of, or the start of, social networking with regard to MySpace and even Facebook a little bit was about 6 years ago. So perhaps a 13-year-old that was on MySpace and starting on Facebook has about 6 or 7 years of social networking behind them as they're going into the university space and is going into their first jobs. They're kind of the canaries in the coal mine.
Yeah, I was just interesting. Like less than a month ago, I was in Azerbaijan at the Internet Governance Forum, moderating a workshop of young people from the Caucasus region, the UK, Denmark, Hong Kong, and a young person from Denmark was saying, I'm the same person online as I am offline. I'm just me. And I learned social norms. I learned how to behave myself and be good to other people and respectful. And I'm just that person online. And a young person from the UK, maybe because of the way he was taught in school or by the online safety organization that brought him to Baku, was saying that he's very different online. He's much more cautious. He's much more respectful of people online than he is offline, because he knows that it's a much broader audience. There are much more adults in it than typically at school, and so he's very, very conscious of reputation, and he's in high school. So I think you have a spectrum there too, but I think it's those who are just themselves online, the same online and offline, who are really kind of thinking about being a good, well-rounded person and decent and respectful and civil to other people in both places. if that makes any sense.
Well, I think that you all are talking about something that's really important, especially for a high school student looking to transition into college. There's a lot of knowledge that they bring to the table, as you mentioned, Tom, in terms of years of experience. One of the things that we find very important, I work with student athletes here at Penn State, and we think it's really important for them to think very seriously about what they've created as their identity and or brand or themselves online and who they are, the person that they are. And that begins because, recruiting starts early in high school. And so, students need to really think about how they're presenting themselves online, as well as in person. And that's one of the things that we talked very candidly with them about during their freshman year. Because the reality is, if you're a student athlete, you aren't just representing yourself with your online reputation. You're also representing your team and your school, not to mention your family, your community, and everyone else, which would be something that student athletes share with students. Generally, they're representing themselves, their family, their community online as well. So that's one of the things that we think is really important to kind of at least have them think about what is it that you're presenting about yourself online, and are you okay with that?
Sue, one of the things that struck me, I actually blogged about the amazing work you're doing there at Penn State, and was really interested in how you approach it, how you're really, in a sense, kind of enhancing self-knowledge. You're kind of helping people think about what their core values are and how to bring them out. And it really struck me. It goes very deep, actually.
Yeah. One of the things we think is important is we know as high school students or high schoolers transition into a college environment, their developmental phase, where they are developmentally, one of the things that needs to be considered is their ability to continue with self-awareness. And the truth is they're transitioning from maybe parents or, extended family members' value systems, and they're kind of deciding, okay, are these okay for me? What am I going to take into my adult life? We know that most people stay very close to their initial value systems, but sometimes there's a period of expiration. And so one of the things that we think is important for them to begin to think about is just what you said. What is your value system, and how are you portraying that? Because, as you mentioned earlier, what you're communicating to someone day to day, or even among 30 or 100 other people in a classroom, is much less far-reaching than what you'll, the lives that you'll touch with what you've put online in terms of your social media, in terms of your image. So is it that you're portraying online your core values and what you want to be represented as, or is that not consistent with what, kind of what you're looking at? And I think that you and Tom both mentioned a great point about, is it that social media is social, or is it that it's going to have an impact on your future? And we know that it can right now. What you put out there, according to the statistics that you just talked about, it's going to have an impact on employers. And I can tell you that it'll have an impact on, college coaches and who they want to bring onto their team and, make part of that community. So, I think it's really important for young people to start to begin as they transition into adulthood, very in touch with what it is, who we are, but then who are we conveying that we are? And are those two things the same?
It's almost just important to sort of, you're giving them space, time and space to just sort of sit down and think about that, right?
Right, yeah, even just raising it to a level of awareness I'm grading papers this weekend, and the students need to do a final reflection, and one of the reflections I just read recently said just that. Like, it's a great opportunity to just sit down and think about me and who I am with all of the kind of hecticness of our first year. We do it with our first year student athlete transitioning into college, all of the pressures that kind of go along with that. It was really nice to sit down and think, why am I doing that? And am I okay with what I'm today? Is this really who I am?
You know, I guess one area that I've also heard a lot of talk about is sort of in the policy arena, and Tim, sort of being our policy guru, I was wondering if you might speak to if there are any policy implications caused by the practices of organizations sort of vetting candidates online, or are there states or countries, do you know if they have legislation regarding this, or are there kind of what's your take on this situation?
Well, from a general policy perspective, you know, as you mentioned, we are here in Washington, D.C., and I work quite a bit with Congress. There was a few tweets a year ago or 2 years ago saying, somebody said, you know, at this rate, you know, with Anthony Weiner and Mark Foley and Congressman Chris Lee, within 10 years, pretty much everybody that would be, you know, eligible to run for the United States Congress, the United States Senate, or the United States presidency would be ineligible based on their Twitter use and their Facebook use and their social media use. When I talked about different industries being slower on the uptake with regard to, you know, kind of accepting that people have different personas and they express themselves socially, certainly the political arena is one. So, you know, at the highest level, you could say, perhaps, you know, the social media may be affecting kind of the folks that actually ultimately run for elected office, and it may take some time. There may be some elasticity where, you know, constituents, voters, kind of come to grips with that. That may take some time, and I don't know. I really don't know how this is all going to play out, because I mean, you've seen high-profile, you know, resignations from higher office. Whether it be the General Petraeus situation or the, you know, Mark Foley situation. You know, it's not too long ago, 1992. I mean, for young people, that's a long time ago, obviously. But President Clinton had real trouble running for the presidency, having smoked marijuana. He didn't inhale, apparently, but he had smoked. Al Gore fought vigorously when he ran for president much later about the marijuana issue. Now we have states legalizing marijuana, so it does take some time, but it doesn't. Maybe it takes a little longer than you'd think. I think going to your specific question about policies, you know, as Ann mentioned, a lot of employees are starting to monitor social networking activity for prospective employees. That's in a way dangerous for them. It raises problems for them. Particularly if the person that they're looking into their social media use is from a protected class. Let's say, you know, there's race, sex, etc. And if they don't hire that person, you know, there could be a discrimination grounds. Some members of Congress are asking the Department of Justice to look into the legality of requiring Facebook passwords to be shared with prospective employers. That doesn't seem to be a widely done practice outside of a few discrete industries like law enforcement and like real cybersecurity type jobs, are, you know, maybe ask for them. It's illegal now in California, and it's illegal in, I think, Illinois, to ask for a prospective employee's Facebook password. But the Department of Justice is looking into whether it violates the Stored Communications Act and a few other acts as well. I think the larger question is, you know, if you're asked to share your Facebook password, if you say no, I'm not sure how likely you are going to get the job. Number one. Number two, you probably don't want to work for them anyway. On the other hand, so it's an evolving space. The United States Congress, Senate was trying to pass legislation about it. California did, but interestingly, it's against the law to ask for somebody's password in California. But the statute that Governor Brown signed into law didn't have any penalties whatsoever. So there's no penalties for that particular law. I think it's a cautionary tale. Don't ask for passwords. But that's a different question. The question is social network monitoring for companies. We talk a lot about big data, and sometimes people have trouble getting their arms around what is big data. Big data is basically companies, organizations collecting data for a variety of purposes in these massive databases, and trying to figure out what can we glean from it, what can we learn from it, and amazing things. You can track flu epidemics. Like, for instance, if you had access to big data, Daniel, you might have gotten sick last week from the flu. Presidential elections are being won with big data. Cancers are being cured with big data. But other things is that your social networking footprints are going into big data databases, and they're being aggregated, and they may find their way into kind of what we call data brokers. We historically think of data brokers as ChoicePoint, LexisNexis, other types of other companies outside the credit bureaus, and they get asked when someone's applying for an apartment or somebody's applying for a job, some of those things. They're basically background checks. And when your social graph goes into these data brokers, and someone pings them, you got to be careful what comes back. So big data is, I think it has a lot of positive things, like flu epidemics and winning elections, depending on what party you belong to. But generally, it will find its way ultimately into these dossiers, and you just need to be careful of what you have out there. I think the irony of these policies about asking for your Facebook password, Anne doesn't like to use the word internet safety or online safety, but our first rule of online safety is don't ever share your password. That's the irony, right? Even the head of the CIA forgot that lesson as well.
That's privacy too, Tim, so that's okay.
Okay. All right. Don't ever share your password.
Hey, I totally agree with that, by the way, but I have to apologize. I need to go get my power supply, so I'll be right back. Seconds, okay? Sorry, I didn't think of that before. Be right back.
No worries, Anne. This actually probably would be a great opportunity if you are. Be a great opportunity for you, Sue, I think, to perhaps talk about your experiences working with college students and their online reputation at Penn State. I know that a lot of viewers are really interested in hearing how your program has evolved and potentially replicating it in their communities.
Okay, super, yeah. One of the things that we've done is to talk very candidly about your social, kind of your social media kind of image, what your brand is out there, what is it that you want people to know about you. And, in surveying the students that I work with, one of the things that they talk about is they really like using social media because they feel like it gives them a voice. It gives them a larger audience and a voice, and that's a very positive thing. It can be a very positive thing. The amount of people that they can reach in this capacity is much broader than what they would reach, in their day-to-day lives otherwise. Over and over, I've heard from them, it can be both positive and negative. It can be positive and negative. If you're sharing too much of your social drama, then that's probably not, kind of necessarily the way that they want to go or take a look at. But one of the things that we do when the students come in as first-year students, as part of the seminar that they take, we spend a few days talking about, social networking and some of the guidelines that we have for them here at Penn State, some things that they should look at and very much consider in terms of being a student athlete at Penn State. One being that, think about what you're showing to other people. We appreciate that there was not being use of, alcohol or tobacco or anything like that was on your, on your personal site. That, making sure that they're watching their language when they're on there, and kind of make sure that they're conveying that and recognizing that. One of the things we say to them is, if you should consider who's reading it. So, is it okay for a family member to read that? Is it okay for someone who you are trying to be a positive role model for? So whether it be a family member, a younger sibling, or someone in the larger community, if they can have access to your tweets or your Facebook or whatever it is, then you need to think about using the appropriate type of language. In terms of portraying to be good sportsmanship. And that's obviously a guideline that we talk to them about. Here's the challenge. I mean, something like Twitter is immediate. So there's a lot of emotion involved sometimes. You're thinking about something or something's happening. There's an exchange, and immediately you tweet something, and as soon as you hit it, you go like, that wasn't such a great idea. So to talk about, if you have a 10-second cooling off period, what is it that you do that says, hey, before I go, kind of what am I going to do? What am I going to say? How's this going to be portrayed? One of the things that we encourage them to do is to think about using it not only in terms of kind of saying who you are in terms of kind of what you're doing in your day-to-day life, but in addition to assist others. So if you're going to tweet about yourself, tweet about the things that you're doing that are helping your community. Retweet information that was sent to you that you can kind of send out, and have people that are following you know that there's opportunities to be able to do more good in their community. So I think that most of the students that I work with want to convey a positive image, and sometimes it's just a matter of kind of thinking before you actually put it out there. So we always say to them, here's your test, here's your litmus test. Does mom, dad, or grandma, or grandpa read it? How do you feel about it? Someone who has, is following you in terms of standing, whether it be someone in the community or someone you're being a role model for. How would they receive what you just sent in terms of a message, be it a picture or a tweet or something like that? How would your coach feel about it? How would you feel about having it, as a public entity, otherwise being in a newspaper or something like that? How are you if it's out in the public? How would you feel about it? If you have any hesitation about any of those questions, then you may want to rethink how it is that you're conveying the message that you're trying to send, whether it again be a photo or a tweet or posting something that's on the wall or whatever it is. So I think it's really important for them to kind of sit down and have a conscious decision about what they're doing, and think about what we've been talking about, which is not only it's impacting you, but the role that you have within your family, the community, and the collegiate environment on your team. It's impacting all of those folks as well.
Hey, Sue, how many freshman classes have come through your program now? Have you been doing this for more than a couple of years?
Yes, we have. And this is, I want to say, the 21st year, I think, that we've done programming seminars for first-year student athletes. So don't quote me, it's in 19, 20, or 21, something in there. But as you said, only within probably the past 5 or 6 have we made social media such a content area.
The reason why I asked is I wonder if you're finding more and more incoming freshmen kind of familiar with those bits of advice. I mean, we're seeing in the online safety field people talking to kids at the high elementary grade level and middle school about, being smart about, how they present themselves online. So I wonder, in a way, you're sort of this ongoing longitudinal study. Is there a trend that young people are getting smarter and smarter about this, and that maybe you're finding you're going kind of deeper and thinking more and more about presentation of core values than sort of tips about, not making sure that your grandmother would approve or something?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fantastic point. I would say personally, with my experience and working, adding into the content area, yes. In the past, I would say probably 2 years, maybe 2 to 3 years, you see students come in more informed. The first year that I'm working with right now are definitely more informed and I would say more accepting and understanding of the need to do this. Whereas maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I don't know that the consequences were as had been as founded, and we've kind of caught up with that, and we can now say and demonstrate, hey, there is a problem with this, and it's extremely encouraging to see our students come to campus with more information about how to kind of protect themselves and to use social media in a positive and favorable way.
Anne, I don't think you intended to imply, but I think one of the things that I think we need to point out is that all the data that I've seen is that younger people are much more adept and skillful and mindful of protecting their information than older folks. Do you want to comment on that?
No, yeah, I think the Pew research is showing that they understand how to use Facebook privacy settings, for example, a lot better than their elders do. I'm just wondering if maybe they're, hearing sort of canned online safety messages about this, or if their parents are getting smarter and advising them to, not post something that grandma wouldn't like. I sort of wonder about sourcing, but it may be hard for Sue to tell that, when she's talking with freshmen.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the data, it goes well beyond the Pew Internet data. It goes back to Carnegie Mellon, Alessandro Acquisti data, going back a long time, and young people seem to more intuitively, protect their data and all in their personal information. So I don't think it's as parents, are only responsible for this. I think kids are more intuitively aware.
Well, they want to protect their data from parents too sometimes. Sorry,
Right.
Sue. I think I stepped on you.
No, that's my fault there. I would assert that it's probably, cumulative effect of all of it, to be honest. So they're hearing more in school, they're hearing more from mom and dad, they're learning more from each other. As you said, just inherently they're more aware of that. They've grown up with it. They don't know a world. You look at our students that are in middle school, they don't know a world any different to them. So, I think that I think it's important to continually have that reminder for them. But I would say to you, from what I'm seeing, and I should add this because I'd be remiss if I didn't. I think one of the things too is because I'm working with a specialized population in terms of student athletes, that messaging begins very early because you're trying to get into a college, get onto a particular athletic team at a collegiate level, which is obviously highly competitive. And then in addition, once you're there, you're also getting a ton of messaging about what's acceptable and what's not. So I need to kind of preface the group with whom I work, saying that may be a little different than what we're seeing in the kind of a larger general population.
Gotcha. I guess, Anne, I also wanted to touch on sort of your experience in the media and kind of step back from some of the discussion that we've been having. And I was wondering if you might be able to speak to maybe your perspective about what type of job has the media done in reporting this story. And I know we touched briefly on this, but I feel like this is a lot of folks get their information from the media, and that it's an important outlet. And I was just wondering your opinion.
Well, I come from the media. I've done print, radio, and TV media, so I'm kind of sort of steeped in that life, and I can tell you that it is reporters' jobs to report airplane crashes, not safe landings, right? So what you're going to see in the headlines is not the norm. You're going to see the much more negative picture, and the the Congress people that Tim mentioned and political candidates, I guess there are always going to be some really sad cases, and you also read reports about young teachers who don't change their approach to using Facebook when they get their first job, and so they lose their job because of inappropriate or just unprofessional use of social media in a different phase of their lives. So I think you see the stories, but I think it's really best to if you're a parent, not to extrapolate from the headlines, not to work from the headlines in, but work from your family out. And this is what we talk about all the time, that really it's very, very individual. Use of social media is as individual as the way we live our lives. And I think we need to be thinking more about how exactly what Sue works with her students on, that we kind of work from our core values and see and really think about, give ourselves time to reflect on how we're representing who we really are. And it's just such an insanely busy society that I don't think we take time to do that. And it's fantastic when there are programs for college freshmen that actually take that time or give that time, I hope that answered your question.
That was perfect, and I want to also follow that up with you, Tim. And I know that you've definitely been in this field and are an expert. So also kind of switching gears, what's your best sense of how organizations' interests, including in online resources, in a candidate's vetting process will evolve over time? And I know you mentioned a lot of the pending and or changing legislation, but what's your take? And Ann and Sue, please feel free to jump in.
Tim, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that, Dan. When you said candidate, I assume you mean the employer candidate, not the presidential candidate.
You are correct.
Okay,
but feel free to speak on that as well if you'd like.
Yeah, happy to. I think it's inevitable. I think over time there's going to be a huge factor when it comes to vetting potential employees. I don't think there's any getting around it. That said, I think it can be a very positive thing. Generally, when it comes to hiring people, employers have a really hard time. The resume, the age-old resume, looks like an age-old resume because people need to structure the data and try to compare apples to apples. And the thing is that you have 1,000 candidates for a job, and you want to kind of evaluate them based on the same data. That's why the resume kind of looks the way it does. So employers can kind of, and I'm no expert on employment law or employment hiring or anything like that. I'm no human resources person. However, then you kind of go outside of that space. And I think rather than going outside that space looking for reasons to disqualify a candidate, I think mostly predominantly the trend will be looking for interests in skills and things like that kind of distinguish a candidate. And I think that'll be an interesting space. I think people will come in and say, on paper, these two candidates are about the same, but I really like the way that this girl does that, or the interest in that, and she's blogged every day on that social justice issue, and I think it'll be a very positive thing. I am concerned though about data brokering and what we call social network scraping, where companies are going and scraping social networks, and so you can only do that if your profile is open or the scraper is actually violating the no bots or terms of service for the site. But let's say that your data is going to be scraped from your social network, or some public data that you didn't realize was public gets put into a database. If that gets part of like a background check with a large data broker, I think that's a little disconcerting. When judgments are being made about you and you have no opportunity to correct that data or see that data, I'm a little concerned about that. So I think that's over time, that's what you have to be really, really careful about. My larger kind of, philosophical view on this is that it's the same thing with like quantum bits, right? Once you observe them, they kind of change their nature. It's the same thing with politicians. Once the camera is on a politician, they become kind of different people, right? And they project and they curate a personality. And I kind of think that people need to be authentic. So, and I don't, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm kind of concerned over a period of time where you have people living their lives publicly online to a certain extent, and people are just going to adjust to the fact that people have different diverse views and diverse interests, or do people become more kind of homogenous because they're being observed? And that's a concern for me. I'm sure it's not a topic for your conversation today, though.
Well, I think there are pieces to this, though. I think, okay, so be authentic. You sort of wonder, okay, so if there's all this social networking or social data scraping, what can anybody do about that? And the only answer that comes to mind is, you can't really go back and erase party photos, right? You can't delete stuff. So at some point when you become aware of that, then you have to kind of just be who you are and think about how you're representing that online, right? Does anybody here have a different answer to what to do about that kind of scraping?
Well, to a certain extent, it's illegal. But if it's private data, if you've kind of put it behind your private wall, you shouldn't be scraping. It violates terms of service, et cetera, et cetera. And Congress right now is trying to figure out what penalties exist for violating terms of service and updating the Laurie-Drew Act. The larger question with regard to taking down your party photos. Europe has been playing around with a law. The European Commission has been playing around with this law called the right to be forgotten. That is a translation. I think the literal French translation is right to oblivion. But the idea is that anything you put out there, you should be able to pull back, no matter where it goes. And as it turns out, legally, people have been spending about past year looking at this since its original draft that came out. And it just seems almost legally, practically, just totally untenable. It just doesn't seem to work. And we're getting a lot of skepticism now from the European Parliament and others that right to be forgotten is just even feasible. So, however, the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States, in their consent decree with Facebook, has required Facebook, upon request, if someone asks to delete their Facebook data that they've put up about themselves, that they have to remove it. It's a very, very limited right to be forgotten or a mandatory deletion rule, but it exists.
I think sort of the upshot or the takeaway should not be that, I don't think we're suggesting that people should be hiding more or making everything private, because I think one of the things we're learning from looking at all this is that you really want to be a multidimensional human being online as well as offline. You want to be seen as that, and apparently some of the data shows that employers are looking for that. So it's really better to think in terms of curating your own public image rather than hiding it, right? Sue, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. One of the things that we talk about in class is, okay, the idea of kind of a brand, or you've got your brand out there. But the truth is, sometimes what we're seeing is, most people are putting really happy, fun vacation photos up there, or putting party photos, as we said, which can be controversial. But likely we're showing like the upside of us, the best part. I was sitting at a pep rally, and there were two young women in front of me, and they were taking pictures of the pep rally, and then they proceeded to, I was assuming that they proceeded to upload to their phones to upload that to their Facebook and talk about how much fun they were having. And I was sitting with my class and say, actually, I'm not sure you were having fun at the pep rally. It was more important that you were posting to say you were having fun, because in the 5 minutes it took you to post them, you were detached from your current environment, which was fun at the pep rally, because it was more important to send that out to everyone else. So I just say all that, because one of the things that we look at is as people are looking at each other, Facebook, you're kind of almost inside other people's lives. The idea of that emotional contagion, especially with younger people that are involved in this, and or a kind of a fear or a lessening of, oh, my life doesn't measure up. It's not as amazing. And I think what both of y'all just said is extremely important. Is I don't think your brand online should be made up. I think it should be part of who you are. But the truth is, if you're not running around drinking in front of an employer or a potential employer, you got to think about what you're putting up online if you're going to allow them to have access to it, or if they can have some access to it. So, Anne, I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but it made me think of that when you were speaking.
Yeah, I really appreciated what you said about kind of not going overboard. This isn't social media isn't performance art, and maybe eventually prospective employers and college recruiters and stuff will start to see through some of the performances. And just going back to Tim's point about authenticity, that I think maybe that's best. Maybe that's the best approach to take. But what that means for each individual is we're not sure. But I think if we can sort of lean in that direction, that's a fairly intelligent place to go. But it is evolving, isn't it, guys?
Sure.
We've been getting a lot of great questions from some of our audience members, and I was wondering if it would be all right with you if we tackle some of those in the remaining time?
Sure.
Sure. How much time do we have left?
I'd say we have maybe about time for maybe one or two questions, and then I also want us to be able to share some resources if that's all right with everybody, just so that some of the educators and parents and students are able to take some of those and investigate further off our hangout. But one question directed to the group from I believe a high school student was asking, essentially, to paraphrase, what should I do if I've made some mistakes in the past and prospective colleges and scholarship committees and athletic recruiters, what should I do if they Google me, they show up? And yeah.
Well, you can spend $5,000 a year for Reputation.com to help your search engine results, or there's a lower version of that for $3,000 a year, or the basic version for $99 a year. I'm actually kind of joking, but these reputation management companies are getting more and more profitable because people want to. How do they deal with their search engine results? But I think that's a better question for Sue or for Anne.
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have much to add to that.
Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, sorry. Anne may be able to speak to this better than me. But one of the things that we advise students to frequently Google themselves, but then to do their best to make sure that more positive kind of messaging is at the forefront. So that chronologically, when someone pulls your Google search, that things that you've done more recently are showing up first.
That's what I've heard too, that it's just good to be proactive. So, if there's something that really, as I said at the very beginning, if there's something that's really interesting that you're passionate about, that you want to get engaged in your community in a real way, not just to have better search engine optimization, but to, do a blog or just tweet about or frequently, comment in Facebook, like a page and, have it participate in the work of the organization who has that page. That kind of thing, being proactive in a positive way, is what rises to the top.
That's very sound advice. Thank you, guys. Actually, there are two questions that I found from our folks out there in the audience. One of them is really intriguing and asks about how your online reputation could be affected by your mobile activities. And I know we talked about Sue, you talked about folks taking pictures at pep rallies, and Tim, you also talked um, about certain congressmen and elected officials, and Sue, I'm sure, or rather, Anne, I'm sure that you probably are able to add to that. But what's your take on mobile activities, and maybe how all this will evolve over time, since mobile is becoming an increasingly more popular medium as opposed to laptops and computers?
Well, I personally, I think this is online reputation, right? There's no difference between whether you're on your laptop, whether you're on a desktop, whether you're on an iPad, or whether you're on your mobile. It's all online. Let's just kind of. That said, the way people interface with their devices is a little bit different. I think there's a little more immediacy with using your mobile device. You're out in the world, you're moving around, your location is being shared. And when you actually go to post things, whether it be photos or just comments, because people are less tolerant of having multiple steps on a mobile device, they want to get the data out as quickly as they can. You may not have that kind of pause before you hit the send button or the snap button or things like that. There's in a laptop and a keyboard, a QWERTY keyboard space, you seem to be more deliberative when it comes to your communication, even though sometimes you tweet something you shouldn't have done, or you sent an email that you shouldn't have said in anger. But it's all the same. That's all I can say. Location is a big deal, though.
Yeah, you just can't stop thinking about your actions. You can't, stop thinking before you click, no matter what device you're on. And because we can't possibly know the end destination of digital media, right? We can't possibly know, even with all the best privacy settings in place, that a friend or an ex-friend or somebody isn't going to pass it along, copy and paste or whatever. Whether the origin is a phone or a computer or a tablet or whatever. So I think what we're seeing is that our social activities are getting incredibly diversified. We're seeing incredible market segmentation. Like I just heard about Boxer, right? So that is voice texting. So it's asynchronous like texting, but it has the spontaneity or sort of intimacy of voice. And, so it's not texting and it's not phone, but it's something in between. So we've got this, and, stuff can be Snapchat. It's extremely ephemeral. A photo, goes away in 10 seconds, but somebody can grab a screenshot. So we have to, and the screenshot can then go on somewhere that we didn't expect. So we have to keep thinking.
I would completely agree. I think that's the best takeaway advice is, even though there's a immediacy within the device, especially mobile, that we've got to have that kind of cool off period no matter what we're going to do. We need a 5-second countdown, before we text or Snapchat or, to do anything from that standpoint. Because one of the other things that we need to consider is that, other people also have mobile devices. So it may not be a picture you're obviously taking of yourself and posting. But if you're in a group of people and you're part of that, you don't know where that picture goes. So, the truth is we don't have control about part of it. And so I think that's an important piece of it, of kind of being aware of your own behavior. I think that's probably good advice regardless of whether you're talking about, social media. But just in general, that's one of the things that we know can happen is it's not necessarily a photo you've taken or even approved of you that shows up somewhere. I think you have to think, as Dan and Tim mentioned, think before you act.
Right. That's before we sign off. I just saw one really one question that kind of stood out, and it seemed as if this is also a rather young student who might have a friend or might him or herself be looking for some help. And they write, besides looking at online reputation resources and tools, which I'm sure we'll also add to what we'll talk about, but who could I talk about online reputation issues in the real world on sort of a practical basis?
Start with people you love and trust and ask them what they think about how you shape a reputation. You know, it might be a clergy person, it might be an aunt or uncle or a mom or dad or a cousin you just really love. But, you know, start polling some friends and people you're close to and get an ongoing conversation going, and I bet everybody will learn a lot. Just a thought.
Daniel, I'm not sure I understood the question very well.
I guess that kind of to Anne's point, this individual is looking for some folks or some ideas about who he or she could be able to go to for guidance in maybe who they have a personal relationship with.
Yeah, then I second what Anne said.
I agree.
Terrific. It sounds like we have consensus then. And I'd add that I think that Anne has hit the nail on the head. Maybe like guidance counselors if you're in a school, potentially employment agencies if you're using one, and if you're a little older. Before we wrap up, I know we've had a full plate of great discussion, but I wanted to get to some of the takeaways that you'd be able to take with you. And one thing that is that I'd really like to sort of broadcast is a lot of us right now we're on Google Plus's Google Hangout, and a lot of folks use Google products, and one great tool that they have is the Google Dashboard, which if you log into your account, you are able to see your Google Dashboard and their functionalities. If you Google a service called Me on the Web, it essentially does a lot of the stuff that Sue and Ann and Tim were talking about. For instance, it'll almost like a Google alert. It'll alert you every single time you or perhaps someone else posts about you or maybe a similar an individual with an identical name, which I know is another topic of interest, and maybe we'll cover that next time. But definitely check out Google's Me on the Web. I know I also wanted to highlight kind of what really even got this whole hangout going is Anne had a fantastic article on Net Family News about possible actionable online resources and information from reputable sources, and I'll be sure to post that. And also bringing it together, I wanted to touch on GetNetWise as a fantastic source for folks who have questions about general online safety. They should definitely visit getnetwise.org. Are there any other resources that you guys like to contribute?
I guess I'd just like to say that I really appreciated that last question. Is there an echo? Is that better? Okay. I really appreciated that last question because I think it brings out something a really good takeaway that it's not just about online resources. It's about, you know, sort of gathering all the resources that we have at our disposal for guidance. You know, it's a great big toolbox, and lots of times it's the people we're closest to who we kind of forget to sort of, whose wisdom we forget to tap into. And so that's a great resource too. And I was really glad that that person asked that question.
You know, that's really well put. And you know, does you know, seeing as we're a little bit over time, does anyone else would they like to add some maybe concluding thoughts or remarks?
Well, I'm glad, Dan. I'm glad you mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned dashboard, because if people go to Google Dashboard, if they're heavy Google users, they can see kind of all the data that Google has about them, all the different services they use, and it's really kind of eye-opening. You know, if you've been using Google for a long time or Google services for a long time, you kind of get a sense. Oh, I forgot I had like those photos up on Picasa and things like that. It kind of brings it all together for you, and it's really kind of an eye-opening, educational thing. None of it may be, you know, cause for concern, but you at least can get a better sense of the breadth of your digital footprints. And I think it's a really, I'd recommend anyone do it.
Yeah, and I know that we're short on time. And I just want to say, you know, thank you so much for, you know, inviting us to talk about such an important subject. And I really think that hopefully the message, or one of them, is that yes, it's very important to educate yourself about how to protect the information or data that you're putting out there. I think it's important to know how to, you know, understand, as Tim just talked about, all of the information that can be posted about you. And as Anne had mentioned, I really like what she said too about going to people that are closest to you, because I think maybe a way to be successful as we transition into this, because I still think we're in transition in terms of social media, is that we stay grounded in kind of who we are and how we access information and learn more about ourselves, and at the same time inviting, you know, additional ways to be able to kind of look at and open up all of the very positive aspects of social media, you know, and at the same time being able to kind of protect ourselves and make sure that we are conveying who we really are.
You know, that was just a great close, Sue. And if anyone doesn't have anything else to add, I wanted to thank you all for being a part of this. And if all things goes according to plan, hopefully this won't be our last conversation, because there's so much to talk about, and so many folks like yourselves doing such great work. And for all of you out in cyberspace, we hope to continue the conversation, perhaps offline, but definitely keep your ears pricked for more information and some great resources from our friends. And tune in next time, and we'll see you then. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.